are thousands of lakes nestled among the folds of the mountains and valleys of this country, but none have a reputation quite like Bridal Veil Lake. It's a stretch of water that looks like a glistening gem among the evergreens, reflecting the sky's changing moods with a kind of eloquence that captures the hearts of artists and dreamers alike. And people say it's one of those places where time feels suspended, like nature holds its breath. I used to visit it often, seeking solace in its gentle embrace. And for years, it was nothing more than a beautiful retreat from the noise of life, until the Polaroid Man appeared. I'd heard about him in hushed whispers, stories exchanged around campfires or over hot mugs of cocoa in the nearby lodge. At first, I dismissed these tales as local folklore meant to entertain tourists and add an air of mystery to the place. They said he was a spectral figure who wandered the shores with an old-fashioned Polaroid camera, taking pictures of unsuspecting visitors. Those who saw him, it was said, would find themselves captured in the frame of his instant photos, revealing a future too grim to bear. The first time I encountered something unusual was during one of my solitary walks by the lake. The day was serene, with a gentle breeze teasing ripples across the water's surface. I had my sketch pad, trying to capture the way the light danced among the trees. Absorbed in my work, I barely noticed the temperature drop, the air around me suddenly feeling dense and heavy. When I finally looked up, there was a figure standing across the lake. He was dressed in a suit, out of place with his surroundings, his silhouette sharp against the soft hues of the forest. Even from a distance, I could see him holding something bulky in his hands. It was an old camera, one of those outdated Polaroid models. He lifted it slowly to his eyes, and before I could react, there was a flash. Blinking away the spots from my eyes, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. When my vision cleared, he was gone, as if he had never been there at all. The air around me returned to its normal, balmy state, but I found myself unsettled, haunted by the encounter. Days passed, and the memory of the Polaroid Man lingered, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I sought information, questioning locals and researching in old archives. There were mentions here and there, but nothing concrete, just anecdotes from people who claimed to have been photographed by him. Each story carried a sense of dread, as if the act of being captured by his lens marked a turning point, a descent into unavoidable tragedy. There was a woman who drowned in the lake, a man who vanished during a hiking trip, a child who fell gravely ill. Their photographs were always found later, tucked into their belongings, depicting scenes of their looming fates. Despite my curiosity, or perhaps because of it, I found myself drawn to the lake more often. It was as if the mystery of the Polaroid Man had entwined itself with my love for the place. Both frightening and compelling, I told myself I wouldn't let old tales deter me from my usual walks. But deep down, I knew I was hoping to see him again, to understand the truth behind the stories. One late afternoon, the opportunity presented itself. The light was fading, painting the sky with strokes of orange and pink. The lake was eerily calm, and as I strolled along its banks, a strange sensation washed over me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and there he was again, closer this time. I could see the details of his face, pale, almost translucent, with eyes that seemed to see through me. The worn Polaroid camera hung from his neck like an ancient relic. He raised the camera slowly, deliberately, and I felt rooted to the spot, unable to move or cry out. The flash went off, and in that brief moment, I thought I saw something in the reflection of the lens, a glimpse of myself, but not as I was now. It was a distorted image, as if I were submerged in water, my face twisted in fear or pain. The vision disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving me gasping for breath. The Polaroid man lowered the camera, meeting my eyes with a look that seemed almost apologetic before he turned and walked into the forest, vanishing among the trees. I stood there for what felt like hours, the chill of the encounter settling deep within my bone. When I finally mustered the strength to move, I made my way back to the lodge, my mind racing with questions and fears I could not articulate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the darkness around me thick and suffocating. My mind replayed the moment of the flash over and over, and the image I had seen haunted me. It was as if I were on the brink of an understanding that eluded me. A truth too terrible to grasp in its entirety. I considered the possibility that what I had seen was merely a trick of the mind, an illusion born from the fear that the stories had sown within me. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The following morning, my resolve to uncover the truth hardened. I returned to the lake, pacing the shore with a sense of urgency. It was then I noticed something unusual among the reeds. A photograph. Its edges damp, but the image clear. It was a Polaroid, and I trembled as I picked it up. The photo was of me, standing at the lake's edge, just as I had been the previous day, with the shadowy figure of the Polaroid man in the background. Holding the picture felt like clutching a piece of my own fate, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that time was running out. I needed answers, and there was only one place I could think to find them. I needed to confront him, to demand an explanation, to break whatever curse his photographs carried. So, I braced myself, returning to the lake every day, hoping to draw him out. Each visit was filled with a spiraling sense of dread and anticipation, a mix of fear and determination. When he finally appeared again, it was with an air of inevitability. The light of the setting sun cast long shadows across the water, and there he was, standing silently as if waiting for me. I walked straight towards him, my heart pounding with each step. As I approached, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of photographs, fanning them out like a deck of cards. Each one showed a different image of me drowning, falling, gasping for breath. "Why?" I demanded, my voice breaking the silence that hung between us. "Why do you do this?" He looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. "To warn," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it echoed in the stillness. "To change what cannot be changed." "But these are predictive?" I stammered, unsure if I even believed my own words. "Possibilities," he corrected, nodding slowly. "Each path is fragile, and fate is a web that can be altered. But not everyone heeds the warning." I wanted to argue, to refuse belief in such a cryptic explanation, but deep down, I felt the truth of his words resonate within me. As he spoke, the photographs he held began to fade, the images blurring until they were nothing more than blank sheets. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice filled with the desperation of someone clinging to the edge of a cliff. He placed one last photograph in my hand, an empty frame. "Listen, observe, and live with purpose," he said. "The future is not set, but it is fragile." With that, he turned and walked away, dissolving into the forest's gloom, leaving me with the weight of his cryptic warning and an empty photograph. I stood there, alone by the lake, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting the world into shadow. In the days that followed, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, as if the eyes of fate itself were upon me. I was hyper-aware of every decision, every action, wondering which might be the one that sealed my destiny. I moved through my days with caution, observing the world around me with a heightened sense of awareness, striving to find meaning in every moment, every interaction. The Polaroid man and his cryptic message lingered in my thoughts, a constant reminder of the precarious nature of life and the interwoven threads of destiny. I continued visiting the lake, but it was never with the same sense of peace. Instead, it became a place of reflection, a mirror to the uncertainty that life holds. I realized that perhaps that was his gift, the awareness to live fully, to avoid the trap of complacency, and to appreciate the fragile beauty of every fleeting moment. Even now, I carry the empty Polaroid with me, a talisman against the unknown, and a reminder of the paths I have yet to tread. I often wonder if our paths will cross again, if the Polaroid man will emerge from the shadows with another warning or another chance to alter the threads of fate. Until then, I live with the lingering fear, not of the Polaroid man or his photographs, but of the choices I make and the paths they forge. The town of Hollow Ridge lay at the edge of what the locals called the Old Highway, a stretch of road that twisted and turned through dense woods and rolling hills, its asphalt cracked and faded. The highway led nowhere particular, and no one quite remembered why it was built in the first place. It was as if it had always been there, meandering away from the town as if to escape its grasp. On fog-heavy mornings, when the mist clung to the trees and muted the world to a hush, Hollow Ridge felt like a place suspended in time, detached from the present and tethered to a past no one could quite recall. Life in the town moved at a slow, steady pace. Days drifted by, each much like the last, marked only by the predictable trajectory of the sun. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were few and far between. I had lived in Hollow Ridge my entire life, inheriting my family's modest home at the edge of town, where the old highway began its winding journey. My days were spent tending to the small family-owned bookstore, a relic in its own right, filled with the scent of dust and forgotten stories. It was in the midst of this mundane existence that I first heard the rumors. Whispers carried on the wind spoke of a stranger, a man who appeared without warning and disappeared just as suddenly. Some said he was tall and shadowy. Others insisted he was nondescript, easily forgotten once he was out of sight. But all agreed on one thing. He made his presence known at the town's crossroads, offering something peculiar, second chances. I was intrigued but skeptical. It sounded like the sort of ghost story children concocted to frighten one another during sleepovers. Yet there was an unsettling consistency to these tales, a shared thread that bound them into something more than mere folklore. The stories were always the same. A person down on their luck meets the stranger. A bargain is struck, and the individual's life is irrevocably altered. Despite my hesitation, a part of me, a part I scarcely acknowledged, longed for change. My life had settled into a comfortable yet stifling routine, and the notion of a second chance held an inexplicable allure. It was on a particularly dreary evening, the sky heavy with the promise of rain, that I found myself drawn to the crossroads, curiosity outweighing caution. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the world was cloaked in a soft gray twilight. As I approached the crossroads, a figure emerged from the shadows, standing by the roadside with an air of quiet authority. He was neither remarkable nor unremarkable. He wore a simple suit, the kind that would go unnoticed in any crowd, yet there was an undeniable magnetism about him. "Evening," he greeted, his voice smooth and calm like the surface of a still pond. "I hear you might be interested in a second chance." His words sent a chill racing up my spine, and I hesitated, caught off guard by his directness. I don't know, I replied cautiously, unsure of what I was even considering. Everyone deserves another shot, he continued as if sensing my inner turmoil. A chance to change what they couldn't before. I was silent, the weight of his offer settling over me like a heavy shroud. What do you want in return? I finally asked, the question almost a whisper. A simple exchange, he smiled, though the expression did not reach his eyes. A token of your past, something you've held on to for too long. I thought of the small locket I wore, a memento from a life I once hoped for but never achieved. It seemed a small price, yet there was an underlying unease, a sense that this was no ordinary transaction. Think it over, he added, his tone patient, as if time were inconsequential. I'll be here when you're ready. With that, he turned and melted into the shadows, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the persistent murmur of the wind through the trees. I returned home, the encounter gnawing at the edges of my mind. What would a second chance look like for me? The question lingered, intertwining with my dreams that night, haunting me with visions of paths not taken. Days passed, the memory of that evening fading, yet never quite vanishing. The stranger's proposition remained an enigma, a puzzle I couldn't solve, and yet it consumed my thoughts. I watched the townsfolk go about their lives, each carrying their burdens, and I wondered if any of them had met the stranger as I did. I saw no signs, no evidence of change, yet the possibility lingered. It was a week later when the first signs of disturbance appeared. Mrs. Henderson, a kindly old woman known for her quick wit and sharper tongue, suddenly began speaking of regrets long buried. She confided in me during a visit to the bookstore, her voice tinged with a wistful sadness I hadn't seen before. I wish I'd done things differently, she murmured, fingers tracing the edges of a worn photograph. I couldn't help but wonder if she too had encountered the stranger. As the days stretched into weeks, more and more residents of Hollow Ridge seemed to be gripped by a similar longing, a shared yearning for a life not lived. At times, she could think of herself as her own, with a life to live. Conversations shifted from the mundane to the introspective, each person subtly altered, as if glimpsing a world beyond their reach. Hollow Ridge itself felt different, the air charged with an undercurrent of change, as if the town itself was awakening from a long slumber. I returned to the crossroads often, sometimes lingering in the shadows, hoping to catch another glimpse of the stranger. But he was elusive, appearing only when least expected and always with the same proposition. My resolve wavered, the temptation of his offer growing with each passing day. I felt the weight of my own regrets, the paths I hadn't walked, and the dreams left unfulfilled. It was during one of these restless nights that I made my decision. Clutching the locket in my hand, I returned to the crossroads, determined to confront whatever fate awaited me. The stranger was there, as if he had been waiting all along. His presence was as unsettling as before, yet there was a strange comfort in his familiarity. I've decided, I said, my voice wavering slightly. I held out the locket, my fingers trembling. He took it gently, his touch surprisingly warm. You won't regret it, he assured, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that belied his calm demeanor. What happens now? I asked, unsure of what I had set in motion. He smiled, a genuine warmth that seemed to transform his features. Now the world unfolds, he replied cryptically. Live your second chance as it comes. With those words, he turned and vanished once more, leaving me standing at the crossroads, alone, but with a newfound sense of purpose. I returned home, the air around me feeling lighter, as if a great weight had lifted. The days that followed were surreal, Events unfolding in ways I could never have predicted. Opportunities arose where before there had been none. A chance meeting with an old friend led to a job offer, one that reignited a long-forgotten passion. I found myself embracing life with a vigor I hadn't felt in years, as if the stranger's promise had breathed new life into my weary soul. The changes were subtle at first, like the slow, steady turning of a wheel. Yet, there was no denying the impact. The town itself seemed to blossom in accordance, its residents more vibrant, more connected, as if sharing in a collective awakening. I watched as friendships rekindled, old grievances settled, and new ventures blossomed. It was as if the spirit of Hollow Ridge had been renewed, the town and its people given a second chance. But as time went on, a disquieting feeling began to creep in. A shadow lurking at the edges of my newfound happiness. Dreams haunted my nights, vivid and unsettling, filled with glimpses of the past and the choices I had made. It was as if the locket, the token of my old life, was trying to find its way back to me, whispering of unfinished business. The stranger was rarely seen, yet his presence was felt in the whispers of the wind and the murmur of the trees. People spoke of him in hushed tones, as if acknowledging his influence would somehow invite his return. I began to notice subtle changes in those who had taken the deal, a flicker of doubt in their eyes, a hesitation, as if questioning the price they had paid. I found myself drawn back to the crossroads, compelled by a need for answers. The stranger was there, waiting as if he had never left. "You have questions," he stated, his voice as calm as ever. "Is it worth it?" I asked, the weight of the locket heavy on my heart. "These second chances, are they real?" He regarded me with a knowing gaze, his silence speaking volumes. "What you make of them is what matters," he finally replied. "Each choice feeds the next." "But at what cost?" I pressed, feeling the urgency of my own doubts. "The cost is what you offer," he said simply, his eyes reflecting a depth of understanding I couldn't fathom. "The past is a tether. To move forward, one must let go." Nodded, absorbing his words, the truth resonating within me. As much as I feared the unknown, I understood that the journey was mine to navigate, the path mine to forge. The realization brought a sense of peace, a clarity I hadn't expected. I returned to my life with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to make the most of my second chance. Yet the lingering fear remained, the shadow of the stranger's presence, a constant reminder of the path I had chosen. I could see it in the eyes of those who had also made the deal, a shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the pact we had entered. Hollow Ridge continued to thrive, its people embracing their newfound lives with an eagerness that bordered on fervent. Yet beneath the surface, the town held its breath, aware that the stranger's influence, while transformative, was not without its price. Stories of second chances still whispered through the town, a part of its fabric, a reminder of the mysterious figure who had offered us a glimpse beyond the veil. In the end, the man who sold second chances remained a mystery, a shadow at the edge of the old highway, a guardian of the crossroads. His presence was felt in the rustle of the leaves, the whisper of the wind, and the quiet dreams that lingered long after dawn had broken. We had all taken his bargain, in one form or another, and in doing so, we had reshaped the destiny of Hollow Ridge. And so, life continued, marked by the subtle echoes of what might have been and the profound realization of what was yet to come. The stranger's shadow lingered, a reminder that the past was never truly forgotten, and that every choice carried its own weight, as we walked the path of our second chances. Story Green's nighttime convenience and grocery was the last place one would expect to find any real semblance of a deal with the devil. Nestled on the edge of our small town, the store's flickering neon sign would sputter into life as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow across the empty parking lot. By day, the shop was a simple, unremarkable grocery store, but by night, it became a peculiar refuge for those who wandered in. Those seeking more than the mundane items it stocked. I first stumbled upon She's during one of my late-night walks, an attempt to clear my mind from the day's monotony. The quiet town offered little distraction, but the store, with its welcoming light in the otherwise dark street, seemed promising. The moment I stepped inside, a chill swept over me. It was not the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, but rather one that whispered of things unseen and stories untold. A bell above the door rang, announcing my arrival, and I was instantly enveloped in the faint aroma of aged wood and something sweetly metallic. The aisles were narrow, lined with shelves that held a strangely curated selection of goods. At first glance, they seemed ordinary packets of noodles, cans of soup, bread in plastic. However, upon closer inspection, the labels bore symbols and languages that were unfamiliar to me, their meanings obscure. It was as if the store catered to patrons from beyond this realm, those who knew exactly what they sought. The cashier, a man named She, was as enigmatic as his store. Standing behind the counter under the soft glow of a single bulb, he greeted me with a nod. His presence was calm, his movements deliberate. She appeared ageless, his features smooth and composed, though his eyes held a depth that suggested a knowledge far beyond the years I could assign to him. His voice was soft, but each word seemed to linger in the air longer than expected. "Welcome," he said, eyes following me as I wandered through the aisles. "We have what you need, even if you don't know it yet." I offered a polite smile, though his words resonated with a truth I did not yet comprehend. Browsing through the aisles, I picked up a few items, more out of curiosity than necessity. A jar with a label written in elegant script caught my eye. The liquid inside shimmered oddly, as if it were alive. I placed it in my basket, feeling She's gaze still upon me. When I approached the counter, the transaction was swift and silent, my curiosity outweighing any wariness of the strange place. She bagged my goods with careful precision, his fingers brushing against mine for a fraction of a second as he handed me the change. "Remember," he said, almost as an afterthought, "everything here has a purpose." I left with more questions than answers, the store's presence lingering in my mind long after I returned home. Each night, the pull of She's grew stronger, an inexplicable tug that drew me back to its door, night after night. With each visit, the store's nuances revealed themselves further. I began to notice regulars' faces, both familiar and foreign, each browsing with an intensity that mirrored my own. They exchanged knowing nods with She, their purchases as peculiar as mine. It wasn't long before I realized that the items from She's had peculiar effects. The jar of shimmering liquid, when consumed, brought forth dreams that were vivid and strange, filled with places I had never seen and people I had never met. Yet these dreams left me waking with a sense of unease, as if I had wandered too far from the comfort of reality. One night, as I wandered the aisles, a woman caught my attention. Her appearance was as unremarkable as my own, but her eyes held a story of their own. She moved with a purpose, selecting items without hesitation. I watched as she approached She, her expression one of quiet desperation. "It's time," she said, placing a small vial on the counter. She nodded, his expression unchanged as he rang up her items. Their exchange was brief, but the weight of it was palpable. She departed without another word, her presence vanishing into the night. My curiosity piqued. I approached She after her departure. "What was that about?" I asked, unable to contain my intrigue. She regarded me with a knowing look, his fingers tracing the edge of the counter. "Every item comes with a cost," he replied cryptically. "Sometimes it's a price they are willing to pay." His words haunted me, echoing in my mind long after I had left the store. The dreams continued, growing more vivid and disconcerting, the sense of unease settling deeper into my bones. Each night I found myself returning to She's, the store's haunting presence and addiction I could not shake. I began to notice changes in the town, small, almost imperceptible at first, but they were there. People seemed more withdrawn, their eyes harboring secrets they could not share. Rumors spread of strange occurrences, of disappearances and deals gone wrong. The air buzzed with a tension that crackled like static, a charge that only grew stronger with each passing day. The climax of it all came one night, as the sky wept with rain that battered the town relentlessly. The storm had knocked out power across most of the town, but She's remained a beacon in the darkness, its neon sign flickering defiantly against the gloom. Drawn by an urgent need, I ventured out into the storm, my footsteps splashing through puddles as I made my way to the store. Inside, the atmosphere was charged, the usual calm replaced by a palpable anticipation. She stood behind the counter, his gaze steady as ever. There was a crowd tonight, faces I recognized and those I did not. They milled about the aisles, their movements purposeful, as if they were preparing for something monumental. We approached She, the words pouring out of me in a rush. "What is happening? Why do I keep coming back here?" She regarded me with that same knowing look, his expression unreadable. "You seek answers," he said simply, "and perhaps you're ready to make your own deal." The weight of his words settled over me like a shroud. I realized then that everyone who came to She's was searching for something they could not find elsewhere. They were here to make a choice, to pay a price for something they desired or needed. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She's eyes bore into mine, their depth swallowing any lingering doubts. "Only what you are willing to give." The room seemed to spin, the realization hitting me with the force of a tidal wave. I had been drawn here by something beyond my understanding, a need that had burrowed deep within my soul. The dreams, the unease, the pull of She's. They were all part of a larger design, one I was only just beginning to grasp. As the storm raged outside, I found myself at a crossroads. She's offer hung in the air, its implications clear. I could walk away, let the mystery of She's remain just that, an enigma in the night. Or I could step forward, embrace the unknown and the roles we were all meant to play. With a deep breath, I made my decision. She nodded, his expression one of quiet approval. "Your choice is yours alone," he said, his voice soft yet resonant. "Welcome to the night." The store seemed to hum with energy, the weight of my decision reverberating through the aisles. I knew then that She's held more than just groceries and convenience. It was a portal, a place where the ordinary met the extraordinary, where choices were made and paths diverged. Leaving She's that night, I carried with me the knowledge of what lay ahead. The store's neon sign flickered behind me, a reminder of the world I was leaving behind and the one I was entering. With each step, the sense of unease faded, replaced by a determination born of the unknown. The lingering fear remained, a shadow that would always follow me, a reminder of the price that had been paid and the path I had chosen. Yet, there was also a strange comfort in it, a sense of belonging to something larger than myself. She's nighttime convenience and grocery had changed me, its supernatural operations a testament to the mysteries that lurked just beyond the edge of understanding. As I walked into the night, a part of me knew that I would never be the same, that the deal I had struck would forever shape the course of my life. And in that moment, I embraced it. All the fear, the wonder, and the thrill of the unknown. On a quiet stretch of highway that seemed to disappear into the horizon, there existed a place known only by a simple sign that read, Terminus Truck Stop. It was unremarkable at first glance, with its faded paint and cracked asphalt, the kind of place that travelers passed without a second thought. Yet for those who did stop, it offered a peculiar blend of comfort and unease, a feeling that lingered long after the journey resumed. I found myself at Terminus 1 late autumn evening, the air crisp and expectant, the kind of evening where every breath felt loaded with the weight of invisible potential. I had been driving for hours, my small rusting sedan a cocoon protecting me from the encroaching dark. The dashboard clock ticked over to midnight as I pulled into the truck stop, the neon lights flickering above the entrance, casting a sickly glow across the lot. Inside, the truck stop was a relic of another time, with formica counters and metal stools bolted to the floor. A faint smell of coffee and fried food hung in the air, the scent wrapping around me like a familiar embrace. The cashier, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a warm smile, nodded as I entered. Her name tag read Maggie, and she seemed to be the kind of person who knew all the regulars by name. As I settled myself into a booth, Maggie approached, her steps as measured and familiar as the tick of a metronome. "What'll it be, hon?" she asked, her voice smooth and comforting in the quiet of the night. "Just coffee, please," I replied, offering a polite smile. She nodded, and as she turned to fetch my order, I noticed for the first time a small bulletin board by the counter. It was cluttered with various notices and advertisements, but one particular flyer caught my eye. It was simple, almost plain, with bold black letters that read, "Help wanted, night shift, inquire within." As Maggie returned with my coffee, I asked casually about the job. "Oh, that," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We always need someone for the night shift. Most folks don't last long. You interested?" I hesitated, the caffeine barely beginning to dispel my fatigue, but the thought of some extra money, of settling somewhere even for a little while, was tempting. "Maybe," I said noncommittally. "What makes it so hard to keep someone?" Maggie shrugged, her eyes drifting towards the window, where the darkness pressed like an uninvited guest. "Some say it's the hours. Others think it's the solitude. But that's the nature of the night, isn't it? It asks you to face things you'd rather avoid." I laughed softly, more out of politeness than amusement. "Well, maybe I'll think about it." Maggie nodded, her expression a mix of relief and something unreadable, almost as if she was passing a torch she could no longer bear to hold. "Let me know if you decide. We could use someone with a steady hand." With that, she moved on to another patron, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the persistent hum of the fluorescent lights above. I finished my coffee slowly, the warmth seeping into my bones, and by the time I left Terminus, I had made up my mind to inquire further about the job. The next evening found me back at the truck stop, the highway a ribbon of darkness stretching behind me. Maggie greeted me with the same welcoming smile, and when I told her I was interested in the position, she seemed genuinely pleased. "Great," she said, handing me a small bundle of keys. "You start tonight." The shift was straightforward enough. Keep the place tidy, restock the shelves, and keep an eye on the pumps. It was a routine that promised to be as monotonous as it was lonely, the quiet hours slipping past as the world outside continued its endless rotation. Yet, as the night deepened, I began to notice the strangeness that Maggie had hinted at. The truck stop seemed to possess a life of its own, a rhythm dictated not by the ticking of the clock, but by some deeper, more primal force. Shadows moved in ways that defied logic, stretching and twisting like living things. The lights flickered intermittently, casting the room into sudden darkness that felt dense and suffocating. Around 2 a.m, as I made my rounds, I was stopped by a figure at the counter. He was tall and thin, with a gauntness that seemed to absorb the light. His eyes were hidden in shadow, and his voice when he spoke was a whisper against the silence. "The road never ends, you know," he said, his words slipping into the air like smoke. "It just keeps going even when you think you've reached the end." I nodded, unsure how to respond, the eeriness of his presence sending a chill down my spine. He left without another word, disappearing into the night like a wraith. I watched him go, a sense of unease pooling in the pit of my stomach. The rest of the shift passed without incident, but I left the truck stop with a lingering sense of disquiet, Maggie's cryptic words echoing in my mind. As the days turned into weeks, I settled into my new routine, the hours dragging yet at the same time flying past. Maggie and I rarely spoke of the peculiarities of the night, but I could see the understanding in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of shared secrets. Each shift brought its own subtle disturbances. The shadows continued their dance, and at times I could have sworn I heard whispers threading through the air, voices too faint to understand, yet insistent in their presence. Occasionally, travelers would stop by, their faces lined with weariness, their eyes betraying a knowledge of the road's hidden truths. They never stayed long, a restless energy driving them onward, always onward. One night, as I sat behind the counter, trying to ignore the strange chill that had settled over the room, Maggie joined me. She sat quietly for a moment, her gaze distant, as if peering into some far-off place only she could see. "You ever wonder why people keep moving?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. I shrugged, unsure of what answer she sought. "I suppose it's the search for something better? Something different?" Maggie nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Or maybe it's because they're trying to outrun something. Sometimes we think we can leave things behind, but the truth is, they're always with us. Places like this reveal that." Her words hung between us, heavy with meaning, and I felt an inexplicable urge to ask what she was running from. But the question stuck in my throat, and the moment passed, her gaze returning to the present. As the clock ticked towards 3, I began to notice a change in the atmosphere. The air felt charged, vibrating with an intensity that set my teeth on edge. Outside, the darkness seemed thicker, the shadows congealing into something palpable. The lights flickered more frequently, casting the room into moving patches of light and dark. Then, without warning, the power went out completely, plunging the truck stop into an inky void. Panic seized me momentarily, my hands fumbling as I reached for the flashlight under the counter. Its beam cut through the darkness, revealing the familiar outlines of the room now shrouded in mystery. I moved through the aisles, the flashlight guiding my steps, each sound magnified in the unnatural quiet. The whispers were louder now, distinct and coherent, though I could not discern their meaning. They seemed to rise from the very walls, a chorus that spoke of things ancient and forgotten. As I rounded a corner, the beam caught something that shouldn't have been there. A figure standing still and silent at the end of the aisle. It was the same man from before, his form somehow more substantial and transparent at once, as if he existed between worlds. His eyes, now visible, were infinite pools of shadow, drawing me in with a gravitational pull that I struggled against. "The road never ends," he repeated, his voice a gentle caress that held a warning, a plea. "Even when you think you've reached the end." And then he was gone, leaving only the echo of his words and the oppressive weight of the darkness. The power returned shortly after, the lights flickering back with a mechanical hum that seemed profane against the silence. I stood for a moment, breathing heavily, the flashlight slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. In the harsh light of reality, the terror of the moment seemed absurd, a trick of the mind. Yet, as I resumed my duties, a seed of doubt had been planted, growing roots deep within my consciousness. The night passed without further incident, but I left the truck stop with a sense of foreboding. The words of the mysterious traveler etched into my memory. Over the following weeks, I continued to work the night shift, though I could not shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting just beyond the veil of reality. The whispers persisted, ever present and relentless, weaving their way into my thoughts. I began to dream of the road, up driving endlessly through a landscape that twisted and changed, refusing to conform to the laws of nature. The truck stop appeared in these dreams, a beacon of stability in an ever-shifting world, and yet it too seemed different, its walls breathing, alive with secrets. Maggie noticed the change in me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and understanding, yet she said nothing, allowing me to navigate my own path through the strange reality of the night. The climax came one evening, when a storm swept over the highway, rain lashing against the windows with a ferocity that matched the turmoil within my mind. The truck stop was deserted, the travelers having sought shelter elsewhere, and the isolation intensified the oppressive atmosphere. As the storm raged outside, I felt a compulsion to step beyond the safety of the walls, to face whatever lay hidden in the night. I stood at the entrance, the rain a cold fire against my skin, the world a blur of motion and sound. The road stretched out before me, a ribbon of possibility cutting through the chaos. And in that moment, lingered at the edges of my consciousness. It was tempered by a newfound appreciation for the unknown. In the end, I learned that some places hold within them a power that cannot be tamed, a reminder that there are forces beyond our comprehension. Terminus was such a place, a meeting point of realities where the mundane and the extraordinary intersected. And it was here, amidst the whispers and the shadows that I found my place, a wanderer on the road that never ends. Working the night shift at a gas station nestled in the heart of nowhere had its own unique rhythm. The world seemed suspended in a quiet lull, a place where time ticked by with the gentle persistence of a slow heartbeat. The day's chaos faded with the sun, leaving a serene darkness that enveloped the small convenience store like a comforting shroud. I had taken this job seeking solitude, a break from the bustling city life that had worn me down with its relentless pace. Here, the nights were mine to claim, accompanied only by the low hum of the overhead fluorescent lights and the distant chirping of crickets. The occasional traveler would stop by, often surprise visitors in the desolate hours, seeking fuel or a hot coffee to keep them company on their nocturnal journeys. The store itself was an unremarkable structure, a simple rectangular building with glass doors and wide windows that revealed rows of brightly colored snacks and refreshments. My mother called the door from her refrigerator. I found the routine comforting. I enjoyed the moments when the world was asleep and I was left to tend to the store's mundane needs, a silent guardian of this roadside outpost. For the first few weeks, my nights passed uneventfully. I grew accustomed to the rhythm of tasks, restocking shelves, mopping the floors, counting the till at the end of the shift. But as the days turned into weeks, a peculiar pattern emerged, one that became impossible to ignore. It started with the clock striking midnight, marking the transition from one day to the next. A car would pull into the lot, its headlights piercing the darkness like spectral eyes. The vehicle was unremarkable in its appearance, a worn-out sedan that might have been silver or gray, its paint dulled by time and weather. The driver, however, was anything but ordinary. He was a tall man, his features partially obscured by the shadows. He wore a dark coat, the kind that seemed out of place in the warmth of summer nights. His presence was unsettling, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. He would enter the store silently, his footfalls barely audible, and he never failed to make eye contact with me. There was something in his gaze that felt like an echo of distant memories, a silent acknowledgement of something shared yet unspoken. Each night, he would purchase the same items, a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of water. His actions were methodical, precise, and his words were few. It was always the same exchange. "Night," he would say, his voice low and smooth as he handed me the exact change. Then he would leave, his exit as quiet as his entrance, and the silver sedan would disappear into the night as swiftly as it had arrived. At first, I thought little of it. Travelers often had their quirks, and it wasn't unusual for regulars to adopt specific habits. But as the nights wore on, the weight of his visits grew heavier, like a shadow lengthening under the moonlight. I began to anticipate his arrival, my eyes flicking to the clock as midnight drew near, and my heart thudding with an inexplicable apprehension. One night, I decided to break the cycle of silence. As he approached the counter, I cleared my throat, forcing a casual tone into my voice. "You're a night owl too, huh?" His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Something like that," he replied, his lips curling into a thin, almost wistful smile. There was a pause, a gravity in the air that felt both heavy and fragile. And then he was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of tobacco and a sense of unease that clung to the air. The encounter left me unsettled, my mind teetering on the edge of understanding and confusion. Who was this man, and why did his presence stir something deep within me, a feeling of familiarity tinged with dread? I began to notice other oddities as well. The radio would occasionally crackle to life, whispering snippets of static that sounded like distant voices. The security cameras would flicker without warning, casting the aisles into momentary darkness. Curiosity gnawed at me, and so one evening I decided to dig deeper. I spent a few hours after my shift poring over old records, the dim light of the back office creating shadows that danced along the walls. The station had been here for decades, a relic of an era when the world moved at a slower pace. As I delved into its history, I stumbled upon a series of incidents that sent a chill down my spine. Years ago, there had been an accident, a collision on the highway that ran parallel to the station. A car had veered off the road late at night, its driver succumbing to the lure of sleep. The details were sparse, but a name stood out: Daniel Everett. The face that accompanied the name in the newspaper's yellowed pages was unmistakable, even blurred by time. It was him, the man who visited each night, the stranger with a gaze that pierced through the veil of the present into the past. The revelation shook me, leaving me adrift in a sea of questions. How could he be here, night after night, when by all accounts, Daniel Everett had perished in the accident? My mind raced with possibilities. Was he a ghost? A revenant tethered to this place by unfinished business? Or was there a more rational explanation, one that eluded my grasp? With each passing night, the sense of impending doom grew stronger. I could feel it in the stillness of the air, the way shadows crept along the walls as if alive. The ghostly figure of Daniel Everett loomed larger, his presence an enigma I could not unravel. The nights became a test of endurance, each tick of the clock a reminder that midnight was drawing near. One evening, as I stood behind the counter, the familiar silver sedan pulled into the lot. His arrival was like clockwork, yet that night something felt different. The air was charged with a tension that made my skin prickle with unease. He entered the store, his movements deliberate, and I knew I couldn't let this continue without seeking answers. "Who are you, really?" I blurted out, my voice barely above a whisper as he approached the counter. His eyes, deep and unfathomable, met mine. For a moment I feared he would turn away, leaving me with nothing but silence, but then he spoke, his voice carrying an echo of sadness. "I'm just a memory trying to find its way home." The words resonated within me, striking a chord that vibrated through the fragile web of reality and illusion. "Why here?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation. "Why this place?" He hesitated, as if weighing the weight of his response. "This was the last stop," he murmured, his gaze drifting to the windows that framed the darkness outside. "The place I was going matters less than the journey itself." His words hung in the air, and I followed his gaze, looking out into the night, as if the answers were hidden in the shadows beyond the glass. The realization dawned slowly, like a rising tide. He was trapped in a loop, bound to this place by a moment frozen in time. The night he died, the journey he never completed. Each night was a step in a dance he could not escape. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked, the earnestness of my plea surprising even me. For the first time, his expression softened, a flicker of gratitude crossing his face. "Remember," he said simply, "sometimes it's the only way to set things free." With that, he turned and walked out, his figure dissolving into the night. The sedan's engine purred to life, and then the darkness swallowed him once more. The nights that followed were different. The sense of foreboding lingered, but there was a newfound understanding that lent a bittersweet comfort. I found myself reflecting on the words he had left me with, the idea that remembering could be an act of liberation. As the clock approached midnight, I would step outside, looking up at the stars that dotted the inky sky. They seemed brighter now, like beacons guiding lost souls on their journey. Though Daniel Everett no longer appeared, his presence remained etched in the fabric of the station, like a melody that played on in silence. The radio still whispered its static secrets, and the cameras flickered as if capturing the echoes of a story that had unfolded long before I arrived. I continued working there, each shift a reminder of the strange and wondrous encounters that lay hidden in the folds of night. The station stood as a testament to the uncanny, a place where the veil between worlds thinned and memories walked alongside the living. I found solace in the knowledge that I could be a guardian of these stories, a keeper of memories that deserved to be told and retold. The fear that had once gripped my heart loosened its hold, replaced by a quiet acceptance of the unknown. The night shift became a sanctuary, a space where the mundane and the otherworldly converged in an intricate dance. I realized that in remembering, I too became a part of the story, a thread woven into the tapestry of a haunting that defied explanation. And so, each night, as the clock inched toward midnight, I would stand by the window, eyes scanning the horizon for a glimpse of taillights or a shadowy figure. I knew they wouldn't come, not anymore, but in the stillness of the night, with the gentle hum of the gas station as my only companion, I could almost hear the soft echo of footsteps, a reminder that not all stories need an ending to be complete.